The Netflix Witcher.
Fuck. Jesus.
What I had intended to be one 10-minute video has ballooned into 3 separate videos. It's not my fault that in between seasons Simon Callow changed his performance so much that the same character apparently went from being an erudite and well-spoken man.
Sorcerer's rejects too often train as killers, and this Rience, we know, was kicked out of Banard.
To being a working-class hunchback.
You're lucky the trap's broken. Usually it shoots 20-inch metal spikes out the studs. Got a hawker a few nights ago.
How? How does nobody on your show catch that error? And people were complaining on Game of Thrones that a Starbucks coffee cup had been negligently left in shot. You seem to have forgotten that a character was a hunchback in your show.
A dwarf.
No, a hunchback. It's not my fault that they seem to be making Jaskier LGBT for no good reason, apart from to turn the series into an extended struggle session, and with Radovid of all people. I don't even recognise what they've done with Radovid. I remember him as being a calculating psychotic genius, and they've turned him into an ineffectual fop. Who the hell thought it was a good idea to ship Jaskier and Radovid? Not much thought seems to be given to entertainment in this show, and I get the feeling from female commenters that they'd tune in a lot more to the show if Henry Cavill got his shirt off once an episode. I'm not sure what would make me happy in this.
Those look good. A big salty clam would sure go great with this heat.
Netflix took a serial womanizer in Jaskier in the books and made him gay for a psychopath in their series, but I can't mess around. I'm not doing a part 4 for this review. I reviewed the whole new Mission Impossible film in around 10 minutes, and that was a 2.5 hour long film. But this...
A dwarf.
There's just so much wrong with it. You see, the show's so bad, it's even making my clips go awry. But it's not all bad. Henry Cavill's still good. I just wish he was on camera more. You'd think The Witcher would get more screen time in the series The Witcher, but more time seems to be spent on Ciri being unbearable. Geralt goes to the secret base that's on the Redanian-Temerian border here, hoping to find Reince. He doesn't find Reince, but he does find an enormous abomination. Someone has been experimenting on the missing students from Aretuza, and the bodies of multiple women have been fused into a hideous monstrosity of flailing limbs and flesh. I can't see this show surviving without Henry Cavill. I like the work they've done on the monster in places, but when it's slamming Geralt around, it and his body don't seem to quite mesh up somehow. It doesn't quite look like they're occupying the same space. After Geralt wins, he finds a young woman who resembles Ciri in appearance and age, but with no memory, in the wizard's lair and takes her with him. So that part was good, but I've also been reading the Witcher books, and that's made all of this series worse in comparison, because in the books, Geralt didn't find the girl here. Codringer found her in a local town, with the intention of using her as a decoy to throw people off Ciri's scent. Geralt still had this conversation with Codringer in this episode, and then just happened upon the girl who fit the bill a few days later. Netflix wrote coincidences into the story that weren't there originally. And this is a theme, because most of the problems that I've been identifying in the show in these reviews don't even exist in the books. Netflix has taken a pretty functional story from the books, filled it with errors and act like it's an improvement. For example, the thing with the trap in the door handle at Codringer and Fens in the show that I complained about, asking why would a detective agency have a trap that skewered the hand of anyone trying to hire them? And the answer is, in the book, they didn't. There was a trap in the door handle in the book, but it triggered if someone tried to pick the lock on the door, or could be set off manually if the occupant inside the place didn't like who was knocking. So Netflix took something in the book that was fine and ruined it. They retroactively made the story worse. It must be galling for the author. I wouldn't even say the books are a masterpiece. Maybe they lose something in the translation from the original Polish, but they're at no point incompetent. And as Netflix have been making these changes, the viewership of the Netflix Witcher has been continually dropping. Another thing that I brought up in my reviews was the door owner Codringer saying this.
And this Rience, we know, was kicked out of Banard.
I didn't like that because it would leave the audience not knowing what Bannard was. It actually gives the wrong impression of what Bannard is because the writers didn't pay proper attention to the source material, and I suggested that they instead call it the Magic Academy at Bannard so viewers would know what the hell they were talking about, and I also suggested that they should have expanded on Reince's past, talk about his training with the security services to build him up as a worthwhile antagonist. And I promise I'm not making this up. I had never read the books before, but it was kind of so uncanny that it freaked me out, because I got to the section of the book that they took this scene from, Geralt, Codringer and Fens, because they do lift whole scenes from the books and then make them worse. What I found was that this section of The Witcher Book 4, Time of Contempt, and in my version of the book it's on page 17, Codringer says this: "That Reince," began Codringer, who interests you so much, is quite a mysterious character. I've been able to ascertain that he was a student at the School for Sorcerers in Bannard for 2 years. They threw him out after catching him thieving. Recruiting officers from the Cadwen Security Service were waiting outside the school, as usual, and Reince allowed himself to be recruited. I was unable to determine what he did for the Cadwen Security Service, but Sorcerers Rejects are usually trained as killers. That passage is taken right from the books, so what I mean by reading that out is that the errors I identified and the things in my view that the Netflix Witcher story needed were all in the original book, and the people at Netflix chose to cut them out. They couldn't find time for lines that would make the story actually make sense. This is beyond the pale. To write a story for it to have problems is one thing, but to take a fully functional, crafted story and then mess it up is almost impressively inept. They did bother with the representation though. They were too busy taking the character Fen, who in the books is a man called Jacob, and remaking him so he's now being played by a lesbian actress with a disability, to find the time to make the dialogue make any sense. I feel the need once again, Netflix, to point out that your focus is in entirely the wrong place. I haven't finished the 4th book yet, but I am past the parts that they covered in episodes 1 and 2 of season 3, and there weren't any scenes of people loudly exclaiming their LGBTQ status apropos of nothing in the books. The scene I hated where Yennefer went to hire someone to make her a portal when she herself can make portals was also not as far as I can see in the source material, and they kind of betray that the writers of the series didn't really understand the source material at all. The reason in the books that Yennefer didn't just make a portal herself and went by horse instead is that magic in the Witcher world can be tracked. So she was trying to not use magic. Ergo, in the series, when she broke that guy's neck using magic, she likely gave her location away. This whole explanation was cut from the series. And they just forget that Yennefer could make portals in earlier episodes. I'm having my doubts that a scene with a race-swapped Philippa Eilhart whipping a restrained Dijkstra to his great enjoyment is going to be in the books either, but maybe it will come up later. They've written in loads of scenes of Ciri being horrible to Yennefer for no good reason. Fringilla escaped from the worst security prison in the world by climbing into a body bag to have the guards just carry her out assuming she's dead and throw her down a hill so she can go back to being a terrible character, and Codringer and Fen get off by Reince so Simon Callow can now forget about the role for a second time. And thank the stars that episode's over. Now I can drift off into peaceful sleep and try to forget this episode ever existed, albeit with the looming threat of episode 3 already coming onto the horizon.
Fuck.